Good evening, everyone. This week we are looking at the fundamentalist modernist controversy, and instead of focusing upon the theological protagonists and antagonists, I've decided to take a different approach by focusing our attention on H.L. Mencken, who was a journalist, 1880 to 1956, who was the one whose writing, I think, significantly shaped the public perceptions of fundamentalism and led to a general cultural moving away from the fundamentalist perspective. Um, W.I. Thomas, a sociologist in the 1920s, said that situations we define as real are real in their consequences. And in many respects, it wasn't the actual events, the actual things that were said, the arguments that were made by Bryan or by Darrow, or the arguments that were made in a more intellectual context by J. Gresham Machen or Shaler Matthews that determined, or Harry Emerson Fosdick, that determined the direction that the culture went. Rather, it was the perceptions that were created in the narrative by the biting, sarcastic, satiric criticisms that came of fundamentalists from the pen of H.L. Mencken. Mencken's general view of religion was negative in America. He was a follower of Nietzsche in some respects. He was an atheist. He was famous for saying that Puritanism is defined as the haunting fear that someone somewhere may be happy. And he believed that Puritanism was an attempt to impose moral standards upon the body politic as a whole. And his major concern wasn't really the beliefs that people had, but the idea that they would take those beliefs and impose them on people through the mechanism of the state, the mechanism of the government. So politics was the key issue with which he was concerned. And that is why much of the vitriol that he expressed uh, toward William Jennings Bryan at the Scopes trial wasn't really so much about Bryan as um, theologian, because Bryan was not a great theologian. What he was a politician. He had been Secretary of State. He had been three-time Democratic candidate for president, and he from Mencken's perspective, Bryan was really just someone who um, was a country bumpkin, so to speak, from the Midwest, who was angry with all of the urban elites that had rejected him when he was running for president, and they wanted to get back at them by bringing the country, so to speak, the country bumpkins into the mainstream of control of things in society. So Mencken caricatured both fundamentalism and Bryan in particular. Uh, he coming out of his caricature of Bryan, uh, the impression was left among the American people that it was ignorant country people who were the fundamentalists, not the urban elites. Now, that wasn't really true. J. Gresham Machen, even Mencken himself, when he wrote an obituary in 1937 for J. Gresham Machen, was quite impressed with Machen's education, with his erudite expression of his faith, and in fact believed that, in contrast to the modernists like Shaler Matthews or Harry Emerson Fosdick, Machen was accurate in his depiction of Christianity as something that either had to be believed, you had to believe that the resurrection took place, you had to believe that Jesus was the Son of God, you had to believe that the scriptures were the accurate revelation of God, or you really didn't have much of anything left. All that Christianity would become then would be just moral platitudes that really had no power to them. And for Mencken, religion was much deeper than that. It was an expression of, or should be, an expression of some kind of connection that people might have with God. And he had no patience just for argument's sake. But that view that only ignorant Southern country people were fundamentalists would hold to those kind of views became the kind of a dominant viewpoint. Secondly, that label of obscurantists, that is, anti-intellectuals, Mencken called them homo boobiens, that would be people who were just boobs, who would not really understand anything sophisticated. Mencken was an elitist, and he believed that the educated urban elites should really control most of everything. And well, consequently, he reacted very negatively to this idea that of democracy, that people might know something that the elites really don't. So I believe is this characterization that really won the day. It wasn't the arguments that won the day. It was this: nobody wanted to be associated with anti-intellectual, people if you're going to be part of the cultural mainstream or the cultural elite. More and more people were moving to the cities. They wanted to be sophisticated. And so that defines it. Situations we define as real are real in their consequences. So Mencken's definition became what the culture as a whole accepted as to what fundamentalism actually was, and consequently the fundamentalists in the mainstream of American society for the middle part of the 20th century got marginalized and pushed to the side. Now it resurged with redefinition, as Noll calls it, the post-fundamentalist evangelical movement into the modern world, particularly with Billy Graham and others. But that, I think, was the result. It wasn't the arguments, it was the narrative. Thank you.